everyone, welcome back to Keto and Crime and Thought Crime. Today we're delving into the Daybell preliminary hearing that took place this month in Fremont County, Idaho, under Magistrate Judge Farron Eddins. During this two-day trial, there were dozens of witnesses called, including detectives from the FBI, the agents that not only conducted investigation of the various electronic devices that were used in gathering evidence, but also the FBI agents that actually found the bodies on his property. Several of the police officers from the Rexburg Police Department and the Fremont County Sheriff, as well as several family members and friends, including Melanie Gibb, David Warwick, and many other people that testified as to the events leading up to where we are now in the Vallow-Daybell case. In the end, the judge did determine that there was enough evidence to hold him over for suppression of evidence and conspiracy to commit destruction, alteration, and concealment of evidence, and he was remanded back to the Madison County, Idaho jail with a $1 million bail. So he's going on to arraignment. So we are going to see him arraigned, where he will enter a plea. And then if he pleads not guilty, we'll go on to an actual trial on these cases. Now, I think the reason that they're probably going to hold him for a while is because they really do expect new charges to come out on both him and Lori Vallow, who's still being held on suspicion of the murder of her two children. The whole abandonment of children was dropped because, you can't really abandon dead children. So all of that was dropped, but she's still being held $1 million. And they're trying to piece together what happened to probably preclude more charges. So I think we're going to see definitely a murder one go against both of them. I can't say for sure, but I don't see how they can avoid it at this point. It's kind of clean cut. But what I'm going to do is do a summary of the 2 days of the trial. It happened on a Monday and Tuesday. And I'm going to do a summary of everything that went down at that trial for you if you did not get to watch. Now, if you do want to watch it, I'll link the East Idaho News YouTube page down below. They streamed the entire trial via Zoom so you can see it. But I'm going to do a simple review of it for you. But before we do that, I'm going to give a quick shout out to my patrons and my channel members if you'd like to join them. Links to my Patreon are down below. Links to the channel. The channel join button is down next to the subscription channel. Please do me a favor if you can and hit one of them. Either join or subscribe if you haven't, because that really helps the channel. Also, give me a like, give me a share. Any attention you can bring to it helps me grow and helps me continue to bring in just enough money to pay to bring you these things. Like I said, it's always appreciated, never required. And as before, I will put down timestamps below to the different sections. But first, let me give a shout out to my patrons and my channel members. My channel members, Samantha Stevens, thank you so much. My patrons, Kat Willett, Demelza Pasco, sorry girl, dry throat, and a shout out to Chloe as well. Lauren Kirk, Sarah Carney, Andrea Lee, and Tabora Summers Cooper. Thank you so much. I could not do it without you. You allow me to buy the books and things. Also, the many of you that have sent me PayPal donations, always appreciate it. I turn around and buy different books and research materials, use software to improve the channel, saving up for a brand new camera, all that good stuff to kind of make the channel better. I did receive a message from one of you, MC. I'm going to also answer you in the comments, but you commented on one of my videos that you messaged me a case suggestion via Instagram. I do have an Instagram. It's linked down below. If you want to follow me there. I'm not as active on there as I should be. I'm going to correct that, but I did not receive that message. So if you could please either shoot me a Facebook message. My Facebook is down there. Try again on Instagram, or even email me. If you go to the About section of this channel, you can find my email address, and I'll be happy to consider that case. I will be going into some other things next week. On Thursday, Friday, I'll be releasing the Mayan 2012 End of the World, That Time the World Ended video. And then over the weekend, I'm going to bring you a review, the promised review on the Trump book, the Mary Trump book. And then I will also be going into 2 white-collar crime cases because I have vastly been letting down my white collar crime fan. So we'll be delving into those as well. And I've also purchased, by request from a subscriber, the Chad Daybell autobiography. I have purchased that for Kindle, and I will be reading and reviewing that in the coming weeks. So look forward to those. Anyway, thank you so much. And now let's get into the 2 days of Chad Daybell's preliminary trial. By delving into the Melanie Gibb, David Warwick testimony first. First, Melanie, she took us back to her and David Warwick's September 2019 visit to Lori, Alex, and possibly Melanie Polowaski's Rexburg, Idaho residences for a conference that was taking place down the street, she said. And she spoke about how she had stayed at Lori's house in Tylee's room, and how David had slept in JJ's room during the visit. And so she said she spent most nights with Lori, and most of the time she spent with Lori in view or with Lori, except for the 10 hours at the Saturday event on the 21st. And remember, September 21st, 2019 is the infamous trip to Yellowstone National Park, which was essentially the last time Tylee was seen alive with Lori, JJ, and Alex. She said that she never saw Tylee the entire time she was there. She was asked about her relationship with Tylee, in which it was ascertained that she had absolutely no relationship with Tylee, and then it was brought out that perhaps Tylee didn't like her, though that is hearsay from a deceased person. But she said she never saw Tylee the entire time that she was at the trip, and Lori advised her that she was attending classes and staying at Brigham Young University, Idaho. So then they asked her about the night of the 22nd, which is the day before they left, in which she said that her, David Warwick, and Lori recorded a podcast episode in Lori's kitchen that evening, and halfway in between their podcasts later at night, Alex brought in a sleeping JJ who was asleep on his shoulder and put him to bed. Now, they had a conversation over the course of this weekend about JJ's behavior, leading up to the morning of September 23rd, which was a Monday, where JJ was nowhere to be seen. Lori said that she had sent him over to Alex's because he was acting very strangely, very hostile. And basically she told both Melanie and possibly David that she suspected JJ had become a zombie, and that he was climbing on the refrigerator, he was climbing on appliances, he had knocked a picture of Jesus off, and was just generally acting like a wild child, and she had sent him to stay with her brother Alex, who lived next door. And it was at that point that she told him she was exploring options of sending JJ to live with his grandparents, the Woodcocks, instead of living there, because with everything going on, she just didn't have the time to care for JJ. And so after that conversation, her and David left around 9 a.m. to go to the town of Portatello. It was also brought out that during this trip, David, and Chad Daybell had gone to look at some property near Daybell's, where he was encouraging David, who was a general contractor, to purchase and build on the land, wanting him to move to Idaho. And that was basically all that was said about Chad. The only contact she appears to have had with Chad during that whole trip. But after she returned home, she said she spoke to Lori on the phone and was told that she had met Kay at the airport and given JJ over to her, telling them that she had breast cancer and would not be able to properly care for JJ, and he was now living with them. And then we fast forward a little bit in her testimony to November 26th in Pleasant Grove, Utah, where she was staying at David Warwick's home. And Chad called her to tell on her cell phone, telling her not to answer if the Rexburg PD called her asking about JJ. she asked Chad Daybell, "What do you mean? Isn't JJ with Kay?" Referring to the Woodcocks. And Chad said no. So she was very confused and upset, but that was pretty much the gist of that conversation. He told her not to speak to the Rexburg Police Department if they called. So this was the first welfare visit that had been called in about JJ, and they were there looking for him. Approximately 2 hours later, on November 26th, Lori called saying that everything was fine. She said she told police that JJ and Melanie were at a movie in Arizona seeing Frozen, and could she go to a theater showing Frozen and take random pictures of posters and kids so that it would look like JJ was there. She then told Lori that she had told the Rexburg PD that she was picking up Lori from her house on Thanksgiving. She told her that she had taken JJ back from Kay Woodcock because she was trying to kidnap her, and that she had gotten both threatening phone calls and threatening emails from Kay. Melanie was finding this all, and I have been very tough on Melanie Gibb, but after hearing her testify, I think maybe I was a little hard on her. I think she maybe did. I would like to have seen her go to the police a lot sooner, especially the whole zombie conversations when Melanie was first told that Tylee was a zombie. I really wish that she had gone to the police at that point and just had them investigated. But okay, I guess I should put myself in her shoes. So I'm going to say I was a little tough on her. Not that I shouldn't have entirely been tough on her, but maybe I was a little too tough on her, because I think she was a true believer of this crap, and then it just got out of hand. So anyway, she said she did say she ignored a call and a text from the Rexburg PD because Chad had asked her to, and Lori seemed so upset about it, so she did ignore them. But then, big mistake there, Melanie, by the way. But she did get upset and scared and decided to go ahead and call her Gilbert Arizona PD, where she lived at the time, and talk to an Officer Pillar, where she told him that the whole story about JJ being with her over the week of Thanksgiving was a lie, and that Lori was fabricating it for some reason that she didn't know, and that she had been told that JJ was living with the Woodcocks, where the Officer Pillar told her that was very doubtful, since he had spoken to Rexburg PD and it was evidently the Woodcocks that had called in the welfare check, so it was pretty well assured that he wasn't with his grandparents. Then skip forward to December, where Melanie had agreed to help the police by recording a conversation between her and Lori, and possibly Lori and Chad, and that took place in December. And during it, she asked Chad why he was saying that JJ can't be reached and why you don't want to know. She told Lori that she was basically, she feared for her salvation as a result of all these shenanigans, and Lori said there was nothing wrong. She accused both Rexburg PD and Gilbert PD of colluding with Kay Woodcock, and has said that they are colluding to take JJ away from her, and that they were behind the changing of Charles Vallow's life insurance. No, I'm pretty sure he changed that on his own, because you were a nut job that were trying to kill him and clean him out. And then she also then accused Melanie of colluding with the police, and blatantly asked, "Is this being recorded? Because you sound strange." And Melanie basically got upset too, and a little bit of an argument ensued where Melanie kind of fought back, saying that she's not lying, she's not colluding. She just felt that Lori was being led down a false path, and that she feared for her salvation. And Lori doubled down on that God told her to do everything that she was doing, that is, protecting her child from people that want to take him. Melanie then told Lori she was deceived by Satan, and that she even brought up the deaths of Tammy and Charles, and now JJ's missing, and she said it was not God's word. None of this was God's word. She didn't have any peace about it. And then basically Lori accused Melanie of being dark. So she's calling Melanie a zombie at this point. Better watch out, Melanie. And then she hung up, or she gave the phone over to Chad, who then chimed in that said that he felt that Melanie was not only dark, she was being influenced by his sister-in-law, who was Tammy Daybell's sister, who had a lot of suspicions about Tammy's death. And Melanie said, well, first of all, I don't know your sister-in-law, and I'm not being influenced by someone I don't know. And then he went into saying how sick Tammy was, that her heart had been failing her. She had been sick. He had been having premonitions for years that she was going to die young, and that she had a purpose to fulfill on the other side of the veil. In a previous video, I got that wrong. I said that Lori had said that, but it was actually Chad. There's so much convolution here. There's no wonder why I got a little confused, so I do apologize for that. It was Chad that said Tammy had a position or something to do on the other side of the veil. We know how they like to lift that veil. But anyway, he said that Tammy was feeling very sick that night before she went to bed, and that he, though saddened, was not surprised that she had passed away, that their son Garth was there, and it was confirmed that she died of natural causes. I don't know how, because there was never an autopsy, and she was buried very quickly. And we do know that she was actually exhumed later in the month in December. We still don't know the results of that. I'm hoping they'll release that soon. And that Tammy still visits his children in visions. And then Lori took the phone back and again accused Melanie of having darkness and being a zombie, and that she would be held accountable for all the knowledge that she had, being spiritual knowledge, and she would be held accountable for this lapse in faith on Judgment Day, which in their eyes was July 22nd. You missed that, Lori. You missed it. Anyway, Melanie said that Lori was misreading scriptures, and Lori got all mad and just went absolutely Karen on her, and they eventually hung up with no resolution. But she did get it recorded, and she was listening to them on speakerphone on her phone, and then was recording it with David's phone, and she actually admitted to that. That's how she did it. And if you want to hear that recording, it's in her testimony, which is on the East Idaho News. So then Chad Daybell's attorney cross-examined her. He kept hammering her about whether she was offered a leniency deal for her cooperation based on the one crime that she committed so far that we know of, is lying to a police officer, i.e. the Rexburg PD. And she vehemently said no. He then accused her of meeting with the DA early. She said, I did meet with the DA early, but we just went over my testimony. He said, exactly. What did he coach you to say? She said, we didn't coach. He didn't coach me. I'm just telling what happened. And I have been a witness in a trial before, not a murder trial, but custody trial. And I did meet with the DA prior, and he did kind of want me to. He asked me the very same questions he would ask me in the courtroom, and we went through it. He did not coach me, but he did ask me questions. So there you go. My mom had been falsely accused by my dad of abusing me. So that's the reason that I was testifying. Anyway. And so it went before a criminal proceeding, and the DA got a hold of it. Anyway. So Chad Daybell's attorney kept hammering. And when she spoke with different officers, different FBI agents, she said she remembered some dates, but not all dates. She had spoken with a lot of law enforcement, and she couldn't remember the exact dates. He then asked about her relationship with Alex Cox. She said she knew him. That's about all. But then he asked her to comment on Lori's relationship with Alex Cox, and she said they were close. And then Chad Daybell's lawyer did something that's kind of sick, in my opinion. He kept saying, but they were more than close. They were very, very close, weren't they, Miss Gibb? And she goes, I guess, yeah. And he just kept very, very close. I don't know what he was insinuating. It seems like maybe he was insinuating something incestual. I don't know if that's a tactic to make Chad come out smelling like a rose, which ain't going to happen. But he was continuously hammering her, trying to get her to say that they were unusually close. And she didn't fall for it. She said, they're close. I'm just going to say they're close, and that's where I'm going to end it. So he then again asked about her relationship with Tylee, in which she said, I didn't really have a relationship with Tylee. And then he asked about her relationship with JJ. She said, I tried to talk with JJ, but JJ was autistic and kind of lived in his head, so he didn't really commune with anybody but close family. And then his final questions to her were about the real estate trip that Chad and David took, and she just reaffirmed that David's a general contractor, was also thinking about buying some land, and Chad was trying to convince him to buy some land near Rexburg, but they decided they didn't want to move to Rexburg. Then she was excused, and David Warwick was called to the stand, and he basically, it was very short and sweet with him. He just confirmed that they only briefly saw JJ late that night when Alex Cox brought him in. The only difference was Warwick didn't necessarily say it was during the podcast. He just said later that night. He also confirmed that he never saw Tylee. He confirmed the dates that they were there and the date that they went to look at the land. He also confirmed Lori telling them that JJ was a zombie on September 23rd. And that's essentially when his testimony ended. It was very short. And now we're going to move into some of the testimony of some of the FBI agents that have done some of the investigating, starting with the lead FBI agent during the search of the property for human remains, FBI Special Agent Stephen Daniels. At the beginning of his testimony, they played a phone call, which I am going to play for you in just a second. That was a call that was recorded by the jail between Chad and Lori on the day, on June 9th, when they decided to come out and search the property. And I'm going to play that for you now.
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Are you okay?
So there's searching the property.
The house right now?
Yeah. So Mark Mills will be talking to you.
Okay. What, are they in the house?
No, they're out in the property.
Are they seizing stuff again?
They're searching. There's a search warrant, and so we're going to get on this with the kids.
Okay.
Yeah. So you tried to set up a call, logical.
Yeah.
So we'll see what transpires.
Okay.
Yeah,
What do you want me to do? Pray.
What?
What do you want me to
Yeah,
do?
right. Yeah.
Okay. What can I do for you?
I'm feeling pretty calm. I would call Marco, maybe. Just talk with him.
Have you talked to Hardy?
I did call him, yes.
So he knows what they're doing?
Yeah. It's like a call from somebody else I need to talk to. I love you so much.
Okay, I love you. Should I try to call you later?
I don't know. I don't know. You can try, yeah. I'll answer if I can.
And as you can see, Chad was not in the cheeriest of spirits. I think he knew what they were about to find and what was about to happen to him with his relation of "I'll call you if I can" to Lori. And Lori just seemed very insensitive. I know that she knew she was being recorded. I'm sure that had something to do with it. But still, anyway, just very weird. And then after playing that, they got to actually Daniel's testimony, where he introduced himself and said that he was the senior team leader for forensic recovery for one of the western divisions of the FBI, including the states of Idaho, Utah, and Montana. They were based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. They asked him what kind of training that entailed, and he said he took intensive training in human remains recovery at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, which, if you didn't know about UT Knoxville's body farm, it's very famous for forensic people to go there and train, as well as their medical school also uses it to train. A lot of pathologists and coroners come out of UT Knoxville. And then that they jump forward to the investigation that took place on June 9th and 10th at the Daybell compound. Even though it's property, I'm going to call it a compound. He commented that the technology they used to know where to search were satellite images and call records, and specifically the raccoon text between Chad Daybell and his wife, Tammy. And I think I mistakenly, in one video, said that was between him and Lori. I apologize. It was between him and Tammy. And where he talked about having to shoot the very large raccoon and then burying it in the pet cemetery. So because of those records, namely Alex Cox's cell phone records that kept pinging on the Daybell property, they were able to locate approximately where they thought human remains might be buried. And that was the pond area toward the back and the actual pet cemetery. And they decided to search what they thought looked like a fire pit around the pond. And he called it a fire pit because to him it looked like there was a raised area where it looked like something had been burned, and then there was light vegetation and more vegetation around that, kind of a raised area. And they had vegetation growing on it, but it was light and looks like the top of it had been scorched at one point. So he wanted to dig there to see if something might be there. He also said that they were trying to locate the pet cemetery. They weren't sure exactly where that was until they saw a statue of a dog that had been put there as a memorial, and what appeared to be graves around it. And so he said he drew out with stakes a 10 by 10 area around this dog statue, and that was, by their definition, the pet cemetery. And that's where they began to dig. And so he began his investigation by digging around the pond at what he considered was a fire area, which he then referred to a clandestine grave to keep it separate from the actual Daybell fire pit that was actually there that the family used. So to keep it clean, he started referring to this raised area that looked like it had been scorched at one time as the clandestine grave, and it would be referred to that throughout the entirety of his testimony. So he said they started by removing all the vegetation in that area. Underneath it, they found stones that were protruding out, and so they started to dig by hand around those stones. Once they dug down close enough, it looked as though those stones had been laid in a very deliberate manner to kind of cover what was underneath it. So they very carefully removed the dirt around them and those, taking pictures and scans all along the way. He said they then found thin boards of wood next, which also looked like they had been placed there. They removed those by digging around them by hand. And then they found a black plastic bag that he referred to looked like a large outdoor trash bag. And he said it appeared to be lying as a misshapen bundle. He then wanted to see if there were actually remains in there, so he took a razor blade and he cut the top of the bag. He said he did have to remove it, pull it up to make the cut. So once he did that, all it revealed was a white plastic bag, which he likened to a tall kitchen-style garbage bag. And so he also pulled up the white bag, he said, and also cut it with the razor blade to see what was in there. And that's where he saw human-like hair start to fall out, and he knew this was probably human remains. So he said they began to dig deeper around it to remove the entire bundle. So they dug by hand around the bundle until it was freed from the dirt. They carefully removed the bundle, the plastic bag bundle, and finished cutting both plastic bags off of it. And that's where they found another blob, he said, wrapped in plastic and duct taped very deliberately. They photographed it, they scanned it, it was definitely human remains, he said, and they put it in a body bag and sent it to the coroner to do the further investigation and autopsy. And then from there, he said this was all on June 9th. And he said from there, they moved to the pet cemetery and started digging in that 10 by 10 area by hand. They knew it was a pet cemetery, so they would very definitely find animal remains there. And so as a result, they had an anthropologist who wasn't named, but it was a female, he said, because he couldn't remember the name. But she was there to look at any remains they found to ascertain whether it was animal or human. They did find 2 sets of animal remains, but by digging by hand. And he realized this was much too big of an area to dig by hand. So they did bring in a backhoe to start digging, and they only set the backhoe to dig, he said, 2 feet deep. And they started digging again in that same area. And after digging down 2 feet, they uncovered 2 vertebrae that the anthropologist couldn't determine whether it was animal or human just by glancing at it. She had to take a minute to study. And while she was studying it, Agent Daniel said he was standing near where it had been brought up, and he thought he caught a whiff of human flesh. Because he said when you're in forensics, as long as he is, and you see what he says, and you excavate areas that he excavates, you get very used to the scent of human flesh decaying. And he said he caught that scent. So he just dealt down and started digging by hand and found just north of that dog statue what appeared to be a pelvic bone from a human being that still had flesh on it. And he immediately had it scanned, photographed, and given to the anthropologist to see if it was human. She confirmed that it was, and so they stopped excavating at that point. He said he roped it off, and they would come back the next day to finish. They secured it. By this time, Rexburg PD and Fremont County Sheriffs had arrived, and they secured it for the night. I'm not sure what happened to Daybell at that point. I'm pretty sure with the discovery of the large remains at the pond, which I believe turned out to be JJ, that he was already taken into custody at that time, though it didn't specifically say it in the testimony. And so they secured the area for the night and returned the morning of the 10th to continue to dig in the pet cemetery area. And it took them a while. They started digging by hand again, and they started to find bits and pieces of what they assumed was a person at that time. Again, the anthropologist confirmed it was human. And also he said this was very hard because they had found an intact body next to the pond, but here they found what looked like had been dismembered and possibly burned. So they finally dug down deep enough where they found many small parts of bones and flesh. So they're putting together a puzzle piece of what would turn out to be Tylee, I believe, until they found a melted green bucket, which showed this is probably what some of the parts were burned in. And underneath that was a partially intact skull and mandible with some teeth. And so they took pictures, they scanned it. They tried to remove the remains to give to the coroner, but because of the burning and the decay from being in the earth uncovered, they started to fall apart. They placed the pieces in a body bag for the coroner, and they decided to do an inventory of what parts might be missing. They only found part of Tylee. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so his cross-examination begins, and there was a lot of arguing from Daybell's attorney. He said that the agent wasn't answering his questions. He seemed like he was trying to confuse everybody between fire pit and clandestine grave. And he was saying that he asked the judge to ask the agent to answer his questions clearly as to what the clandestine grave was. Was it that, or was it the fire pit? And the judge reiterated that he had already said that clandestine grave was the raised area near the pond where they found the first body, and the fire pit was the family's fire pit. And he didn't understand what was so hard for the attorney to understand. The judge did a smackdown on Daybell's attorney. Anyway, that's kind of where that testimony ended. I think Daybell's attorney got a little frustrated, but the agent wasn't getting frustrated. The agent was very calm and cool. He never showed any emotion. He just answered everything matter-of-factly, and I think it was infuriating Daybell's attorney. So he kind of just ended the testimony at that point. The prosecutor did a few redirects, and then he was dismissed, and they came up with FBI evidence expert Ben Dean, who was the one that investigated the electronics that were taken from the Daybells and the Coxes and everyone. So he admitted that he mainly had analyzed the thumb drive and hard drive seized from Daybell back in May. He had analyzed the 2 Blu-ray discs that were gotten from both Daybell and Tammy's cell phones. The data from the cell phone companies were put on a Blu-ray. And then he said he was able from that to see all of the cell phone pings. He also relayed the famous raccoon text between Tammy and Chad. And that he was curious as to why he was suddenly so detailed in this text. He said that Daybell texted her that he saw the raccoon, he shot it, he buried it in the pet cemetery, now he was going to go to BYU to write. And she said, good for you. And then he texted her, I'm back home now. So he said he wondered, because he analyzed several months of data, and he said he never saw that kind of detail in their texts. I mean, this was September that this was happening, so it was just a few weeks before Tammy would die. So he said for months before that, they just seemed to be a normal husband and wife that didn't really keep tabs on the other's comings and goings. So he didn't understand why he would need to be so detailed. So he didn't make any guesses as to why, but it's pretty obvious that he was making sure that she knew that something was buried in the pet cemetery, i.e. Tylee. So, yeah. And then, basically the cross-exam was very light. There was really nothing to cross-exam because everybody's read those transcripts and knows exactly what he was saying was absolutely the truth. And then they brought up Rexburg Detective David Stubbs, who was one of the ones sent to do the initial welfare check on JJ at Lori's Rexburg townhome. And I'm going to insert the body cam footage from it here.
This is my body cam footage as myself and Lieutenant Ball approach the apartment number 175 the first time on the 26th. Okay.
Her car's out there too. In the back, it's blue. Blue Subaru.
Hi, you Lori. Lori, I'm Lieutenant Ball, Police Department. How are you? You got a minute? You alone, or that help?
My brother's here.
Okay. This is Detective Stubbs.
Hello.
So, we're here.
Yeah, this is a big mess. I just talked to the guy on the phone.
And what did he ask you?
He was just saying that he wanted to do a well check on JJ.
So JJ would be where?
He's in Arizona.
Who's he with in Arizona?
He's with one of my friends in Arizona.
Oh. Oh, you got a notepad?
No? Let me get one?
No. Come here. You mind if he comes in?
No, no,
So,
no. Sorry.
who's the friend he's with?
My friend Melanie. Her son has autism. Her name's Melanie Gibb. I gave him all the information on the phone.
Okay, so he can call him.
Yeah.
Discord.
Yeah. What is all this?
We're a little
What is
concerned
it? Why?
because, well, the officers who were here earlier
Yeah.
were checking and they got a bad vibe that like something was going on here because nobody knew anything about a child. They weren't talking.
It's because a
What's
lot
going
of
on?
stuff has gone on. If you want to know, it's a lot of stuff. So
Well, that's why we're concerned, because it just was kind of weird.
it is very weird. I've had to move around a lot. One of my brothers is trying to kill me. Not the brother that lives here, obviously. He's kind of my protector. My other brother that was in with my husband, who was trying to kill me for my $2 million life insurance policy.
Now,
So a lot of stuff has gone on in this last year. It's been a horrible year for us. I've had to move around. And so I was going to move back to Arizona, put my son back in the school there because I tried to put him in school here, public school at Kennedy.
okay.
He went for 2 months. We tried it, but he had such a hard time. Now, the person who called is my sister-in-law, but she's his natural grandmother. He's adopted by us. Okay, so her son, who's a drug addict,
Okay.
had a baby with a girl who's a drug addict, and they took him from, CPS took him, gave him to the grandmother. She came and got him, and then she wanted us to adopt him, which we did. And we loved
By
him and
us,
taken care.
who we
My
talking?
husband and I, who died earlier this year.
Okay.
He passed away. Since he
Sorry to
passed
hear that.
away, she's been trying to fight me for him and being really horrible to me and that kind of stuff.
But as you can see on those tapes that Lori lied about Kay giving her trouble because they knew that Kay had been the one to call him the welfare check. She alluded that Charles had been trying to kill her, that Chad was Alex's friend. She didn't really know him. He was an author. She also talked about that how she was still communicating with parents from JJ's former private school on something called the Bloom app, which was an in-school communication device. And she also told them that Tylee was at BYU, Idaho, which we know was a lie because she was never enrolled there. And then we break to Detective Ray Hermosillo of Rexburg PD, who was asked by Detective Hope, and a Detective Hope from Rexburg PD, was asked by Gilbert Police Department to go look for a Jeep that was supposedly in Lori's possession. That was the Jeep that once belonged to Charles, that Tylee had been driving during another attempted welfare check sometime later in November, according to this. Now, that Jeep had been implicated in the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. So, yeah, it just keeps getting more and more choppy. Detective Hermosillo's testimony was kind of interesting because he said that when he went there that day with Detective Hope to look for that Jeep, that he spoke to both Alex Cox and Daybell, who were in the Alex Cox's apartment, who said that JJ was with Kay, but the detective said that's BS because Kay called in some of the welfare checks and they knew for a fact that she didn't have JJ. He also asked Daybell for Lori's telephone number, in which Lori said, I don't have it. Which he said, I don't have Lori's number. I barely know her. They had just got married. Anyway, he went next door to 107, which was Lori's apartment, and started to speak with her. Alex also told him that the last time he saw JJ was in October in 107, and he hadn't seen him since, until you fucking buried him. And then both detectives went next door. He then said that while he was standing there talking to Lori, that Chad Daybell attempted to drive by. He flagged him down, asked him again, do you know Lori and do you have her cell phone number? And it was at that point that Daybell admitted that he did and said that he had lied before because he felt accused. And they didn't ever said if they found the Jeep that day. I'm assuming they did because it is being used in the investigation in Brendan's attempted shooting, as well as other relevance to all the cases intertwined with this. But we then get into kind of Brandon and Melanie Polowaski's part in this. I'm going to give you a brief review of why they were looking for this Jeep. All right, so Melanie Polowaski was born to Lori's sister Stacy in April of 1989. Stacy died in 1998 from diabetes complications to a very rare form of gestational diabetes that she had contracted. However, Melanie had been taken by her father at the age of 6, and at the age of 9 when her mother died, she didn't really have a relationship with her mom, and she had often blamed her dad about that. She blamed the court system, she blamed her dad, and so that kind of fostered, I think, a distrust in the court system for her. Fast forward to 2008, where she married Brandon Boudreaux. Over the course of their marriage, they had 4 children, but in June of 2019, Melanie asked Brandon for a divorce, and she had, to that point, been spending a lot of time with Melanie Gibb, Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, and probably Alex Cox, and had gotten very immersed in their brand of LDS. Now, Brandon was a traditional LDS member, so they were both Mormon, but she had gotten involved into what he has described as a cult. He was very upset. He didn't understand it, but he did grant the divorce. Around this time, Melanie's future husband, Ian Polowaski, also divorces his wife, Natalie. Now, it was at this point that Melanie, actually with her aunt and her uncle, or Aunt Lori, her uncle Alex, and the kids to Idaho after her uncle Charles was shot and killed by her uncle Alex. She did return to Arizona because of the custody agreement with Brandon, but while there, she did live in a townhome right next to Lori and Alex. In October, an attempt was made on Brandon's life. He dropped the 2 older kids off at school and then the younger kids off with Melanie on October 2nd. He then went to the gym and then went home about 9:20 in the morning. He worked from home, so he was heading home to log into work, and he noticed a Jeep that he recognized was parked out in front. And as he drove past it to pull into his driveway, a shot was fired at him, hitting just inches from his head on the front window in his Tesla. Now, Brandon made some really good money. The Jeep, of course, he knew was Charles Vallow's Jeep that Tylee had been driving since Charles's death, and it sped away. He said at first he thought it was a paintball gun, but then realized this was an actual gun and somebody had actually tried to shoot him. He called Gilbert police, and for some reason, 20 police officers arrived, and they shut down the entire block looking for this Jeep, because I guess they feared he was going to go shoot at other people. Melanie told Ian that she suspected Alex in the attempted shooting of Brandon, and that Lori had told her that Brandon was possessed and needed to fulfill the Lord's judgment. So it's almost as if Lori said, hey, your ex-husband's possessed, let's get rid of him, and I'm going to have Alex do it. And she confessed this to Ian. A few days after the attempted shooting, a similar incident happened to Tammy Daybell out in front of their Rexburg home. She said she thought it was a paintball gun, but they missed, and so they suspect that perhaps that also was Alex trying to shoot Tammy Daybell, but that's allegedly. On October 15th, Melanie texted Brandon about moving to Boise, and they need to set up a new custody and visitation plan for the kids. He was pretty upset. He said, well, when are you planning to move? This is news to me. And she told him this week. And so they kind of bantered back and forth. She said, look, we can do this inexpensively and just come up with a custody plan, a visitation plan, or we can go back to court. And so they kind of agreed that Brandon would have the kids the majority of the time, and Melanie would get them during the summer and some holidays. So basically, she's pretty much given up her kids. October 19th, Tammy dies in her sleep. October 22nd, the divorce between Brendan and Melanie is finally final. He does seek full custody of the kids based on the attempted shooting. And Melanie, who had already moved to Idaho, back to Idaho, did a no-show to court, and he ended up getting full custody temporarily at that time. And she ends up again. The first time she went to Idaho was a visit. Now she actually does move into that. On October 23rd is when some of the kids' stuff were moved by Chad and Alex to that storage unit that Lori had rented in Idaho. Mel didn't seem to ask why she wasn't seeing JJ and Tylee. She said she just didn't ask. Chad and Lori flew out to Hawaii, got married, started their little honeymoon there. November 12th, Alex drove Melanie to Utah to visit Brendan's parents because they were there and she wanted to see her children. She showed up at their house and started demanding that they let her in to see her kids. Brandon called the police and she was removed from the property. November 14th, Melanie comes back to the Boudreaux, again asking to see her kids. She wandered into the garage. By this time, Brandon had gone back to Arizona for work. And the police came. They told her to come out. She came out of the garage. They arrested her. And Alex would later bail her out. And it was about this time that she started dating Ian. But she had told Ian, even while they were dating, what she suspected about Alex and Brandon. Then we have the two welfare check. Well, the one welfare check on JJ, and then the search for the Jeep that we heard about in the detective's testimony. And then by November 30th, Ian and Melanie are married in Las Vegas. Alex had also gotten married during that period and took his wife's name. The three split up from then. She didn't see Alex anymore until after she heard he had passed away from a heart problem. In December, Ian texts his ex-wife Natalie, concerned about the attempting shooting of Brandon, and Natalie speaks with Brandon and then calls Ian's mom and told her that she felt Ian and their children were in danger. So Ian and Natalie start making plans to speak with the police about their concerns. Ian does speak with them. That results in Melanie being questioned for 5 hours. Melanie tells Ian that the two cops that were questioning him were possessed. Police gave Ian a recording device to get any info he could. He records Melanie for 2 weeks, turns that over to the police, and then confesses that he did it, and she forgives him. Ian told Natalie that Melanie's uncle were trying to convince her to move to Ammon due to jurisdiction for some reason. He was kind of over it, and he was just trying to say he was never moving. So, yeah, he wasn't leaving Rexburg. And he was trying to convince her to actually go to family court and try to get custody of her own children back. And Chad had told Melanie at some point that her children were dead and she was having nightmares about it. So he was wanting her to go to court to see that her children were actually alive. And it was about this time that Alex passes away in Arizona. Ian did meet with the same detective Hermosa that had gone to, and Hope, that had gone to look for the Jeep at Lori's apartment, and told them everything. He was hoping to get Melanie and his kids away from this group of nutbags. Chad and Lori told her not to speak to the police about anything, but then they actually moved away from the group, and he became convinced that Melanie didn't know anything about any of the deaths. And then, of course, we know Tammy had passed away a few days after the attempted shooting on her and was exhumed in December, though we still don't know anything about the results of that autopsy. And that's pretty much the end of the two trials. Pretty much the other witnesses just rehash pretty much the same thing. And in the end, Magistrate Judge Farron Eddins bound him over for arraignment. And in the back, you can see Mama and Papa Woodcock. Papa Woodcock doing a hallelujah raise to heaven when he's bound over for arraignment. And we're all right there with you, Papa Woodcock. Anyway, that's the summary of the 2 days of Chad Daybell's preliminary trial. And I'll be back tomorrow with a new video. I'll also, of course, keep you up to speed on this case as more developments come in. I think we're going to get them, folks. And with that, until next time, Keto Comics.